Vietnam War veteran returns. Fallen soldier's diary after 56 years. An emotional journey of healing. The year was 1967, and the air over Dak To was thick with smoke, humidity, and the faint metallic scent of blood that never seemed to wash away from battlefields. For young Sergeant Peter Mathews, newly drafted into the U.S. Army's 1st Cavalry Division, survival was the only thought that mattered. Each day was a balancing act between duty and despair, between following orders and simply staying alive long enough to go home. On one harrowing mission, his unit was ordered to Hill 724, where a battle had raged only hours before. The hill still carried the weight of violence. Destroyed trees smoldered, weapons lay abandoned, and silence fell heavily over the scattered bodies of young men who had fought to their last breath. American helicopters had been shot down, enemy bunkers destroyed. Victory was claimed, but at what cost? Peter's assignment that day was as grim as it was routine. Count the bodies, collect documents, gather anything of intelligence value. Soldiers combed through the remnants of backpacks and uniforms, searching for maps or orders that might reveal the enemy's plans. But amid the chaos, Peter stumbled upon something far more human than military reports. Inside a weathered backpack, wrapped carefully in plastic as though its owner had known it must survive the jungle, was a small book. The cover was worn, but when Peter flipped it open, he froze. The pages were alive. They were not battle plans or military strategies. They were poems, illustrations, music, dreams written in ink by a hand that, even in war, took time to write with beauty. The handwriting was steady, elegant, almost artistic. One page sang of the Vietnamese mountains and birds waiting for spring, though the soldier wrote of sleeping with a gun in hand. Another poem revealed devotion to Ho Chi Minh and to the party, mixed with searing hatred toward American soldiers. Still, beneath the politics, there was humanity, the soul of a young man barely beginning his life. Peter made a decision in that instant that he could never fully explain. He slipped the diary into his pocket. He knew he should turn it in, but some quiet voice told him it was different. This wasn't evidence. It wasn't a weapon. It was a human heartbeat captured in words, belonging to a man now lost to war. Decades later, Peter would confess, "I recognized the beauty of it. The handwriting was amazing, and I just thought it was something to really cherish." With only weeks left in his service, Peter's focus was on surviving the war and returning home. The diary, small enough to hide away, traveled with him across the Pacific, leaving the battlefield behind, but never truly disappearing from his conscience. A life interrupted, a book, hidden away. When Peter returned to New Jersey, he was not the same young man who had once crossed the ocean in uniform. Like many veterans, his homecoming was not met with parades, but with silence, confusion, and the heavy burden of memories he could not share. Originally from the Netherlands, Peter had served with only a green card, drafted into a war that was not his by birth. He had bled, fought, and nearly died in Vietnam. But when he came home, he was told he had to wait before he could even call himself an American citizen. The frustration burned deep. He packed away his uniform, his medals, and the diary into a box. Out of sight, out of mind, he tried to bury Vietnam in silence. But war has a way of lingering. Peter drank heavily. He drifted. At one point, he was homeless for 6 weeks. The weight of unspoken memories threatened to pull him under completely. Then came Christine, the woman who would become his wife, his anchor. Together, they built a life, raised children, and began the slow process of healing. But through it all, the diary remained in the shadows. For over 50 years, it lay hidden, its words unread, its story untold. It wasn't until a chance encounter decades later that the diary began to breathe again. One day, visiting a client's home, Peter noticed a simple object hanging on the wall, a traditional Vietnamese conical hat. Something stirred inside him, something long suppressed. He asked the man if he knew anyone who could translate Vietnamese. Days later, for the first time in more than half a century, the diary began to speak. The translations revealed more than Peter could have imagined. The writer was Cao Van Tuat, just 21 years old when he died. His words painted a portrait of a young man both hardened by ideology and softened by love. He wrote of his devotion to Ho Chi Minh, his hatred of Americans, but also of the beauty of his homeland and of a girl he hoped to marry when the war ended. One entry ached with tenderness, a promise to ask for her hand when he returned. That young woman, Peter later learned, never married. She grew old waiting for a man who would never come home. The diary was no longer just a book. It was the soul of a son, a brother, a lover. It was all that remained of a young life swallowed by the jungle of war. Peter knew then what he had to do. I knew I was going to give it back to them, whatever it had to take. I was determined. A journey home. After 56 years. The search for Cao Van Tuat's family began quietly, with small steps, a translated name, and fragments of an address. For years, Peter had no success. Then, in a twist of fate, a local article about his quest traveled across the ocean. Within days, Vietnamese officials and journalists had located the soldiers' surviving relatives. One morning at 3 a.m., Peter's phone rang. On the screen, through the blur of sleep, he saw faces, the sisters and nephew of Cao Van Tuat, seeing the diary for the first time. Their tears spoke a language beyond translation. Within a month, Peter and Christine were on a plane to Vietnam. He had left the country as a soldier, armed and weary. He returned as an old man carrying a book and a heart ready for peace. The moment he landed, he was overwhelmed. Dozens of journalists crowded the airport. Cameras flashed. But the most unforgettable moment came when he met the soldiers' family, women who had lost their brother more than half a century ago, who had never even recovered his body, who had not a single photograph of him to hold. When Peter finally placed the diary into the hands of Cao Van Tuat's sister, he felt as though he had been carrying a weight for decades. "Like I handed over a cinder block," he said. "It felt light once I gave it to her." For the family, it was more than paper and ink. It was the voice of a brother frozen in time, his words returning home after being lost in the fog of war. For the first time in 56 years, they could touch something he had touched, read his dreams, hear his heart. The reunion was more than just personal, it was symbolic. An American veteran, once the enemy, sat side by side with the family of a fallen North Vietnamese soldier. They held hands, they wept. In that moment, the war was no longer a chasm between them. It was a shared wound, a shared history, and now, a shared healing. Peter returned to New Jersey with copies of the diary carefully preserved in a binder. He still reads the pages sometimes, marveling at the beauty of words written under the shadow of war. He often wonders how such creativity, tenderness, and artistry could survive in a young man carrying a rifle through the unforgiving jungles of Dak To. Peter admits he still dreams of the war, still carries memories he has not fully shared. But this act, returning the diary, facing the past, embracing the family of a fallen enemy, has given him something he once thought impossible. "It's a fairy tale ending after all these years," he says softly. A diary, born in the hands of a young soldier, carried across oceans by another, hidden in silence for 56 years, finally found its way home. Not as a relic of war, but as a bridge between nations, between families, between hearts still learning how to heal.